Top 5 Strategic Mistakes that Cost Hitler World War II. In September 1939, Nazi Germany appeared unstoppable. Within 2 years, Hitler's forces had conquered most of Europe, from the Atlantic coast to the gates of Moscow. Yet by May 1945, Berlin lay in ruins, and the Third Reich had collapsed utterly. How did Hitler squander such overwhelming early advantages? Today, we're examining the 5 critical strategic mistakes that transformed certain victory into catastrophic defeat. These weren't small tactical errors. They were fundamental miscalculations that sealed Nazi Germany's fate. Let's dive in. Mistake number 5. Declaring war on the United States. On December 11, 1941, just 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Hitler made one of history's most inexplicable decisions. He declared war on the United States. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor did not obligate Germany to enter the war against America under the Tripartite Pact, which was a defensive alliance. Japan had attacked first, not been attacked. So why did Hitler do it? Hitler catastrophically underestimated American industrial capacity and military potential. He believed the United States was weak, racially divided, and incapable of projecting power across the Atlantic. He thought American democracy made the country soft and ineffective. He couldn't have been more wrong. The numbers tell the story. By 1944, the United States was producing more war material than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. American shipyards launched a new Liberty ship every single day. Before December 1941, Roosevelt faced significant isolationist opposition to entering the European war. Hitler's declaration of war handed Roosevelt exactly what he needed: a legitimate reason to commit America's full industrial and military might to defeating Nazi Germany. Without this colossal blunder, the United States might have focused primarily on Japan, leaving Britain and the Soviet Union to face Germany without the massive American support that proved decisive. Hitler had voluntarily created a truly unwinnable two-front war by adding the world's largest industrial power to his list of enemies. Mistake number 4. The Battle of Britain and switching targets. In the summer of 1940, Hitler stood at the peak of his power. France had fallen in just 6 weeks. The British army had barely escaped at Dunkirk, leaving behind nearly all its heavy equipment. Britain stood alone. The Luftwaffe launched an air campaign to destroy the Royal Air Force and achieve air superiority for a planned invasion, Operation Sea Lion. And initially, this strategy was working. By late August 1940, the RAF was on the ropes. German bombers were systematically destroying British airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories. Fighter Command was losing pilots faster than they could be replaced. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding later admitted that Britain was perhaps 2 weeks away from losing air superiority. Then, Hitler made a fatal decision. On September 7, 1940, he ordered the Luftwaffe to shift from targeting RAF infrastructure to bombing London and other cities, the Blitz. This decision came partly in retaliation for RAF raids on Berlin, and partly from Goering's overconfident belief that the RAF was already defeated. This switch gave the RAF exactly what it desperately needed: time to repair airfields, replace aircraft, and rest exhausted pilots. Within weeks, British fighter strength had recovered. The Luftwaffe, now bombing cities instead of military targets, was taking unsustainable losses without achieving strategic results. By October 1940, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. Britain remained unconquered, providing a staging ground for the eventual Allied invasion of Europe. Churchill famously said of the RAF pilots, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." But those few only survived because Hitler changed his strategy at the critical moment. Hitler's impatience and emotional response to the Berlin raids cost him his best, perhaps his only chance to knock Britain out of the war. Mistake number 3. The Stalingrad obsession. Fast forward to 1942. Operation Barbarossa had failed to knock out the Soviet Union in 1941, but Germany launched a new offensive, Case Blue, aimed at capturing the oil-rich Caucasus region. This was actually sound strategy. Germany desperately needed oil. But Hitler became fixated on capturing Stalingrad, a major industrial city on the Volga River. The city bore Stalin's name, and Hitler saw capturing it as both strategically and symbolically essential. What began as a secondary objective became an obsession. Hitler split Army Group South into two separate army groups. Army Group A headed for the Caucasus oil fields, while Army Group B drove toward Stalingrad. This divided German forces and overstretched supply lines. Hitler's generals argued against this split, but he overruled them. The battle for Stalingrad began in August 1942. The Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe reduced much of the city to rubble, but Soviet defenders held on in brutal house-to-house fighting. Hitler refused to allow General Paulus's Sixth Army to withdraw or maneuver flexibly. He demanded they take the city at any cost. In November 1942, the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, a massive pincer movement that encircled the entire Sixth Army. Over 250,000 German and Axis troops were trapped. Hitler's response? He forbade retreat. "Hold at all costs," he ordered. Göring promised the Luftwaffe could supply the trapped army by air, a promise that proved utterly hollow. The surrounded troops needed 700 tons of supplies daily. The Luftwaffe never delivered more than 300 tons, and usually far less. The Sixth Army was systematically destroyed. By February 1943, when Paulus finally surrendered, only 91,000 of the original 250,000 encircled troops remained alive. Of these survivors, fewer than 6,000 would ever see Germany again. Stalingrad was the turning point on the Eastern Front. Germany lost not just an army, but irreplaceable veteran troops, equipment, and, crucially, the aura of invincibility. After Stalingrad, Germany was strategically on the defensive, reacting to Allied initiatives rather than dictating the war's course. The obsession with one city's symbolic value had cost Hitler the strategic initiative in the East. Mistake number 2. Invading the Soviet Union without defeating Britain. This brings us to perhaps Hitler's most catastrophic strategic error, Operation Barbarossa itself, the invasion of the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. The decision to invade wasn't itself irrational. Hitler's ideology demanded the conquest of Lebensraum in the East. The Nazi-Soviet pact was always meant to be temporary. The Soviet military had been weakened by Stalin's purges, and the USSR did pose a long-term threat to German hegemony in Europe. But the timing was catastrophic. Hitler launched Barbarossa while Britain remained undefeated and active in the war. This created exactly what Germany's military leadership had feared since 1914, a two-front war. The nightmare that had destroyed Imperial Germany in World War I was being deliberately recreated. The Wehrmacht had never developed a comprehensive plan for defeating the Soviet Union. The invasion assumed the Soviet state would collapse after initial defeats, the assumption based on ideology rather than intelligence. Hitler told his generals the campaign would be over in 12 weeks. He believed the USSR was a rotten structure that would collapse in ruins when kicked in. The reality was devastatingly different. The Soviet Union had vast resources, enormous manpower reserves, and the strategic depth to trade space for time. Soviet industry could be moved beyond the Urals, out of German reach. The Russian winter, which somehow came as a surprise to German planners, proved as deadly as Soviet defenders. By December 1941, Operation Barbarossa had failed. Moscow had not fallen. The Wehrmacht had suffered 830,000 casualties, and Germany now faced a prolonged war of attrition against an enemy with greater resources and manpower. Had Hitler focused all German power on defeating Britain first, whether through invasion, blockade, or Mediterranean strategy, the strategic situation would have been entirely different. A negotiated peace with Britain might have been possible. At minimum, Germany wouldn't have been fighting major wars on two fronts simultaneously. Instead, Hitler's ideological obsession and strategic impatience created the conditions for Germany's inevitable defeat. Mistake number 1. The Holocaust and treatment of occupied populations. The number one mistake, both morally catastrophic and strategically self-destructive, was the Holocaust and the brutal Nazi occupation policies in Eastern Europe. From a purely military standpoint, setting aside the unspeakable moral horror, the Holocaust was a strategic disaster. The Nazis diverted enormous resources to genocide that could have been used for the war effort. Trains needed for military logistics were instead used to transport victims to death camps. Troops and SS units were allocated to rounding up and murdering civilians rather than fighting the Allies. Skilled workers and potential soldiers were murdered instead of utilized. Nazi occupation policy turned populations that might have been allies into determined resistance fighters. In Ukraine, the Baltic states, and other Soviet territories, many people initially greeted German forces as liberators from Stalin's brutal regime. This offered Germany a tremendous strategic opportunity, but Hitler's racial ideology made it impossible to exploit this advantage. Instead of treating Soviet citizens as potential allies against Stalin, Nazi policy treated Slavic peoples as subhuman. Villages were burned, civilians massacred, and populations enslaved. The brutality of German occupation policies guaranteed that resistance movements would flourish and local populations would support the Soviet cause. Millions of Soviet citizens who might have fought against Stalin instead fought against Germany. The partisan movement behind German lines tied down hundreds of thousands of troops, disrupted supply lines, and provided intelligence to the Red Army. The Holocaust also ensured that scientists, intellectuals, and skilled workers who could have contributed to Germany's war effort instead fled to Britain and America. The atomic bomb was developed largely by refugees from Nazi persecution. Germany's loss of Jewish scientists and engineers was an incalculable strategic blow. Most fundamentally, the Holocaust guaranteed that Germany's enemies would never accept any outcome except unconditional surrender. No compromise peace was possible with a regime committing industrialized genocide. The Allies were united in their determination to completely destroy the Nazi state. The Holocaust was an unforgivable crime against humanity. It was also strategic madness that helped ensure Germany's total defeat. These 5 mistakes, declaring war on America, switching targets during the Battle of Britain, the Stalingrad obsession, invading the Soviet Union prematurely, and the Holocaust combined with brutal occupation policies, transformed Germany's early advantages into inevitable defeat. Each error stemmed from Hitler's fundamental flaws: ideological fanaticism over strategic reality, emotional impulsiveness over careful planning, and racial prejudice over rational policy. Hitler wasn't a strategic genius who made a few mistakes. He was a gambler whose early lucky wins masked deep strategic incompetence. The war's outcome was never truly inevitable, but Hitler's decisions made Germany's defeat certain. The question wasn't whether Nazi Germany would lose, but only how catastrophic that defeat would be.